Hi everyone. We have Milan Samani, partner at TIL Ventures, sharing his inputs on driving social innovation and impact at scale. Over to you, Milan.
Thank you, Kanish, and thank you, everyone. So I'm going to share with you 3 key points in the 15 minutes that we have together today. The first point is companies make social impact when they create new markets. Number 2, creating new markets requires the creation of new business models. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes this particularly challenging. Before that, a little bit about me. I'm a partner at TIL Ventures. We work with investment organizations and large corporations to develop new ventures that open up new markets. Some of our corporate clients are there on the screen: Barclays, BMW, Disney. Some of the investment organizations that we work with include the International Finance Corporation, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank. Me and my fellow partners at TIL Ventures also teach at a variety of business schools across the world: Sci Business School in Oxford, Cornell in New York, and INSEAD in Singapore. We're published in a variety of publications, and we're based primarily in London and in New York. Okay, so the first point: companies make impact when they create new markets. So what do I mean by that? A company, whether it's a corporation or a startup, can really be thought of as taking a collection of inputs, assembling them together in order to be able to make an output. And frankly, whether you're a company, a government, an NGO, every organization takes the same types of inputs. It takes raw materials, it takes people, and it arranges them into different activities in order to be able to create some form of product or some form of output. Now, of course, if you are a government, your output is a law. If you are an NGO, your output is a program. And if you are a company, whether a startup or a corporation, your output is a product. Now, importantly, if you are a company, all of those inputs have to be arranged together in such a way such that the cost of all of them is lower than the price that you are able to charge for your product in the market, the difference being profit. And that profit is what allows the company to grow, scale, and create further impact. Now, companies do make impact on their inputs. The type of people that they hire, are they having gender equal or racial equal hiring policies? The way they source their raw materials, are they minimizing adverse impact on the environment through the types of raw materials that they source? So companies do make impact on their inputs. And there is a lot of work in the field of sustainability around how companies can minimize any adverse impact through their inputs and indeed create positive impact through their inputs. I am not going to be talking to you about that today. We're not talking about how companies make impact through their inputs. We're talking about how companies make impact through their outputs. But now, if we're saying that a company makes impact through its outputs and its outputs are its products, well, then doesn't every company make social impact in the world? The pen that I use to write makes an impact in my life in that it allows me to be able to communicate clearly. This web platform that we're using allows us to be able to connect in a world where we're not able to travel. Isn't that all creating some form of impact? So what do we mean? Is there some objective way by which we can define a company making outsized impact or wider social impact through its products? And to do that, I'd like to talk to you about this product opportunity map. It's an objective way by which a company can think about the type of impact that it's creating. Along the x-axis at the bottom, you can think about the quantity of impact that a company makes. And the quantity of impact is very simply how many people is your product reaching. And you can think about the groups of people in these 3 broad categories: global elite, global mainstream, and global masses. Global elite is the top 10% of the world. Global mainstream is the middle 60%, and the remaining 30% is, sorry, the global mainstream is the middle 30%, and the global masses are the remaining 60%. So as you go from left to right, the number of people that you are reaching increases. If you are reaching a larger number of people, you are creating further impact. But that's only one dimension. The other dimension is the quality of impact. So there's a quantity of impact, how many people you're reaching, but also the quality of impact. And the way that we think about quality is the functionality that you want to bring out into the world, the products or services that you want to bring out into the world. What are those customers' current alternatives for those functionalities? So if you think about the bottom row, high competing, this is a market space typically referred to as the red ocean. This is where the customer has a lot of options, a lot of alternatives for the functionality you want to bring them. One of our clients is BMW. Here there's a picture of a new BMW 5 Series. It is better in every way than the old BMW 5 Series that came before it. It's safer, it's more efficient, it's more powerful, it's better for the environment. But if you are in the market for a 4-door saloon car, you have lots of options. And really, from a customer experience perspective, whether it's an Audi, a Skoda, or a BMW, Mercedes, the type of customer experience really changes only at the margin. So we do create impact when we create better cars for people in the global elite, but we view that as a served market. And when we innovate in the served market, we're effectively bringing more value to the customer. But then we go up to the underserved market. This is where a customer is using a very poor substitute for the functionality that you want to bring them. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. And then above that, we have the unimagined market. This is where you're bringing something, a functionality to the customer where they've currently got absolutely no alternative at all. So that functionality creates transformative impact in their life because it's nothing like what they currently have. So an example for the global elite could be space travel. Right now, there is simply no option to be able to kind of go up into space, or certainly until very recently. And Virgin Galactic and other companies are innovating these new ways by which we might be able to travel into space. Of course, you have to have $2 million per ticket, so it's reserved only for the global elite. But then if we take another example of M-Pesa, M-Pesa may be a company that you're familiar with. It was mobile money transfer, effectively using money transferring from mobile phone to mobile phone, but it was created some 17 years ago, pre-smartphone, when we all had feature phones, Nokias and the like. And it was created by a larger corporation, Vodafone Safaricom, and it was launched in Kenya. So it enabled ordinary Kenyan citizens, and many of whom were on low incomes, many of whom who were unbanked, didn't have bank accounts, and primarily transacted in cash, to be able to transfer money from mobile phone to mobile phone. Now today, 40% of Kenya's GDP is transmitted using M-Pesa. It transformed a predominantly cash economy into an economy that where money was being able to move digitally. That fundamental innovation allowed hundreds of thousands of African entrepreneurs to have viable businesses. And M-Pesa is credited with lifting Kenya's GDP by several basis points. Of course, it's now expanded beyond Kenya, and mobile money is now much more, it's very prevalent. It's not just M-Pesa doing it, but M-Pesa really kind of created that market. It was a brand new functionality that you could say was where people were using very poor substitutes in the form of cash. You might even say in some people, it was, they had no alternative at all. So it was actually an unimagined market venture. And so when we talk about an objective way to understand how companies make impact in people's lives, anything which is towards the upper right-hand corner, this is deep product impact. This is where we're creating new products, reaching large groups of new people, giving them transformative new experiences to enrich their lives. So the next question we have to ask is, well, why is it hard? Why is innovating up into these underserved and unimagined markets? Well, why are they underserved in the first place? What makes them, what prevents them from being served? And what prevents them from being served is that inside the conventional business model, inside business models which exist today, there is an activity. And we call that activity a critical limiting activity. What I mean by that is every business is a set of activities. A critical limiting activity is a single activity which is critical, essential to the business working. That activity carries with it a high cost, so high that it limits the business model to the served market. The cost of carrying out that single activity means moving up, migrating to the underserved market is simply impossible to do profitably. And therefore, we have to create an entirely new business model. I'll give you an example. The traditional banking business model is really quite straightforward. You have some money to lend. You hire a loan officer who carries out due diligence on customers and determines whether they can repay. So you have a loan officer, he goes to a company and says, can I have your tax returns? Can I have your 3 years worth of accounts? Can I look at your bank statements? And if I can see that you are likely to repay this loan, I will lend you some money at an interest rate that means that some of those loans will go bad, but I will make enough money on the loans that are good for me to be profitable, the traditional banking business model. And if you are an entrepreneur in the UK or the US, a business, you can take out a working capital loan. But if you are a smallholder farmer in Bangladesh, you were an underserved market. And why were you an underserved market? Because think about it. Hiring a loan officer to carry out that type of due diligence, well, the smallholder farmer doesn't have bank statements. He doesn't have 3 years worth of tax records. He only wants a few $100 loan. So the type of due diligence that would have to be done for a bank to be able to determine whether a smallholder farmer would be a good loan would take an enormous amount of time. So that activity of conventional due diligence would be far too costly, particularly when you're only giving a few $100 loan. And so that activity of conventional due diligence prevented a banking business model from migrating up to the underserved market that was rural farmers in Bangladesh. And so the market was unserved. And so until Grameen Bank came along and Mohammed Yunus. And what Mohammed Yunus did and Grameen Bank was they eliminated due diligence entirely. They had an entirely different business model, one where borrowers were asked to self-organize into groups of 8. So you now are not giving one loan, you are giving 8 loans with a single transaction. And they had this new activity of mutual loan responsibility. No due diligence was required at all. Instead, you were asked to group together into, customers were asked to group together in groups of 8, and a working capital loan was broken up into monthly tranches. And the group was told, if any one of you does not pay back January's tranche, none of you will get February's tranche. So conventional due diligence was completely discarded, and this entirely new mechanism in the business model of mutual loan responsibility was used in order to be able to ensure repayment was made. And as we know, Grameen Bank saw 95, 97% repayment rates. A new business model was created, and it was called microfinance. Other competitors entered the market, and microfinance became an entire industry. A new market was created, one that was previously underserved. And so going back to my 3 key points, companies, corporations make impact by creating new markets. What do I mean by that? By innovating into the underserved and unimagined markets. Creating new markets requires new business models. Why? Because existing business models contain these critical limiting activities. And is it hard to create new business models? Yes, but it is possible if critical limiting activities like conventional due diligence are identified and they are entirely worked around. Their objective is achieved using an entirely new means, just as Grameen did with mutual loan responsibility and groups of 8. And so the key point that I want to leave you with is when we talk about innovation, we talk a lot about the customer, understand the customer's needs, wants, goals and desires and pain points. And yes, that is true. But if we want to create real impact and innovate into these underserved and unimagined markets, then actually it is about the customer, but it's much more about the critical limiting activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milan. Thank you so much. Really insightful. And if we have one or two questions, we can take that. Audience, if you have any questions, you can put that on chat, or you can even raise your hand to come on stage. All right. So, Milan, thank you so much. If we have any questions, oh, we have a raise hand. Yeah, we have Dolly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hey, Dolly.
Yeah. So excellent presentation, and this is something that I've been working on for some time, and I needed this kind of very, very good way to really present it. I'd like to know what are your thoughts on really engaging with the uh, women to really innovate new business models, especially for creating social impacts, because that's the area that I've been working in. And
Yeah.
I'm looking for women really bringing about change at the bottom of the pyramid as well as at the high end of technology driven entrepreneurship.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a very important um, area that you're working in. We work all over the world with startups, large investment organizations, and a lot of corporations. In our experience, tapping into the resource that is women is a largely undertapped or untapped resource. I think there's tremendous value that can be done, and so really at all levels, right down from the school level, allowing and providing these opportunities to people from all genders, also all races and ethnicities, and all backgrounds as well. In our experience, successful ventures can come from any of these places. So anything that you're doing to encourage that is, I think, wonderful work.
Thank you very much. Uh, do you
Thanks,
have your
Dolly.
connects here? I think yes. I'll be able to really kind of write a little more and seek your guidance.
It's right on the
Thank
screen.
Right. I have seen that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dolly. All right. Cool. So we just have one last question, Milan.
Yeah,
What
I
is
can
the
see
best?
one from Vince.
Yeah.
What is the best way to make impact?
Yep.
It's to find a large underserved market or a large unimagined market. So if you are in the global mainstream, the global masses, I'm guessing many of you are in India. You've got 1 billion people, huge underserved market. But with a particular focus on these critical limiting activities. I know recently, Paytm has gone public, and there are challenges with the share price. We have to ask ourselves, the fundamental, the heart of every innovation is, have they identified a critical limiting activity, and then do they have a novel way to be able to work around it? You think about Henry Ford, in the 1920s. His core innovation was the production line. He knew that a car at that time was $1,300. He wanted to reduce the price of the car down to $300. But the critical limiting activity when you made cars in the 1920s was the high cost of skilled artisanal labor. There was no way to be able to make a car without the cost of high skilled artisanal labor. By innovating the production line, he was able to drastically lower the cost of creating a car, and was able to open up a huge underserved market. So much so that now cars are just considered a regular way of life. Even if you think about Apple, of course, we think about Apple as being the kind of, so deeply in tune with the customer and beautiful design. But going back 30, 40 years, one of their key innovations was the graphical user interface. Until then, you needed to learn a computer language to be able to use a computer. The innovation of the graphical user interface meant that you no longer needed to learn a computer language. That critical limiting activity of learning a computer language was completely worked around. So I would encourage you, if you want to make impact and, frankly, vast amounts of profit at scale, find these underserved markets, identify that critical limiting activity, and find workarounds to it. That is what we do. And of course, there is an entire methodology that we have in order to engineer the new business models around that. Of course, there's no time to be able to go into that today. But in the short time that we have, find a large underserved market and understand what the critical limiting activity is.
All right. With this, thank you, Milind. Great insights, and we had some really good questions. And thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you all.